For Eldar Ryazanov, the 1970s began with a major change in his personal life. A meeting with Nina Skubina, a friend from college, led to a resurgence of romantic feelings, and while parting with Zoya Fomina was painful, the new relationship rejuvenated Ryazanov and began a decade of successful projects. An order from above sent Ryazanov into an unfamiliar territory. Due to an agreement made between Mosfilm and the Italian studio of Dino De Laurentiis, a joint film was to be made, and Ryazanov was selected to direct the picture. Ryazanov quickly discovered that he had very little control over every aspect of the production, and even the genre was dictated to him, a slapstick comedy similar to It's a Mad, 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 Mad World. Eager to impress their foreign colleagues, Ryazanov and his team worked hard on The Unbelievable Adventures of Italians in Russia, an action comedy filled to the brim with dangerous stunts. An old woman dies in a crowded Italian hospital after telling her granddaughter Olga about a great treasure hidden in Leningrad. The conversation is overheard by two medics, a mafioso, a doctor, and another patient, who immediately set off in search of the jewels. They are met in Russia by Andrei, a policeman disguised as a tour guide, who joins the treasure hunt. During the race, the characters use whatever means necessary to gain an advantage, although Olga knows important clues which she is not keen to share. Ryazanov wasn't a complete stranger to stunt work, featuring them in Watch Out for the Car as well as other works, but this film opened an entire world of opportunities. There was a lengthy and elaborate car chase, on the road and across countryside, through the air, under the water, and a perilous moment with a fire truck ladder, which the actors did without stunt doubles. Other stunts required meticulous coordination, such as the landing of an airliner on a busy highway, or the crossing of a movable bridge by jumping on top of a ship. Finally, a live lion was let loose on Leningrad streets for a series of difficult and risky scenes, which terrified the actors and caused Ryazanov to remark that he wished to never work with animals again. The 1970s and the USSR are referred to as the era of Brezhnev's stagnation. It was a period of slow economic growth and lack of reforms, but it was also an age of relative stability. Visually, the films of this time distanced themselves from the dynamic movement and genre exploration of the 1960s and settled for realistic sets and static cameras. Instead of enthusiastic youth, the lead characters were often people in their 30s and 40s, seemingly successful and at the same time completely dissatisfied with their current situation. Filmmakers like Ryazanov thrived during the stagnation period, being able to tell a deep story even with a small cast and a limited set. Ryazanov's Irony of Fate, a romantic comedy drama, exemplified Brezhnev-era cinema. The plot relies on the fact that many people in the USSR lived in functional yet boring and unimaginative apartment blocks, as explained in the animated opening segment. Zhenya, an unmarried surgeon living in Moscow, plans to propose to his girlfriend on New Year's Eve. Before that, he fulfills an annual tradition by going to a sauna with his friends. An overconsumption of alcohol causes a mix-up, and the semi-conscious Zhenya accidentally travels to Leningrad. Coincidentally, there is an identical apartment building at the same address in Leningrad, with the same layout and door lock. Nadia, the actual owner of the apartment, is shocked to find an intoxicated strange man sleeping on her couch. The situation is further complicated when Nadia's fiancé Hippolyte finds her home with another man. Thus begins a long night of confusion, jealousy, singing songs, drunken escapades, conflicting feelings, and New Year celebrations. As Ryazanov didn't want to cut any part of the story, and movie theaters weren't eager to play a 3-hour-long film, The Irony of Fate was filmed for television, a process which had its own quirks and benefits. Unlike Ryazanov's previous works, the actors performed in front of 3 cameras running simultaneously and could watch the resulting footage immediately on a video recorder. The film premiered in the evening of January 1st, 1976, to an audience of about 100 million people, and it's difficult to overstate its immediate success. The film was in such great demand that its television premiere was followed by a successful theatrical run. Now televised annually, the film owes part of its success to the soundtrack in the then popular genre of guitar bard song.
Я спросил у тополя, где моя любимая. Тополь забросал меня осеннюю листвой.
The lyrics of the film's 8 songs were carefully chosen from various Russian poets, including some controversial ones. Composer Mikhail Taryverdiyev wrote the music, and the songs were performed by famous bard singer Sergei Nikitin and then unknown future superstar Alla Pugacheva.
Мне нравится, что вы больны не мной. Мне нравится, что я больна не вами.
All these factors came together into a film which perfectly captured the role of the apartment in the USSR, a haven of individualism in the land of conformity. Office Romance is another story of an unlikely relationship, this time set in a typical Soviet office building. Andrei Mягков, now a regular actor in Ryazanov's films, plays Anatoly, a lousy, spineless worker, and a middle-aged divorcee with 2 children. His boss, Lyudmila, is an efficient manager, although her emotionless demeanor and unassuming image earns her an unflattering nickname, the Hag. After an incident at a party when the drunk Anatoly talks to Lyudmila in a blunt manner, the two begin a very awkward romance, which turns into a life-changing experience for both of them.
О, вы сегодня прекрасно выглядите.
Так я теперь буду выглядеть всегда.
Once again, through minute details and slice-of-life segments, Ryazanov reflected the zeitgeist of the late 1970s, providing insight into characters' social standing through their appearance, housing, and modes of transportation. Several musical moments serve as distractions from the plot, paired with views of the capital city. The most iconic of these segments shows the freak September snowstorm of 1976, set to the song Nature Has No Bad Weather.
Смену лет, закаты и восходы, и любви последней благодать, как и дату своего ухода, надо благодарно принимать, надо благодарно принимать.
Ryazanov composed the lyrics to the song himself, but had to hide this fact from composer Petrov, as he wasn't yet a published poet. The film was the beginning of 2 new partnerships with Ryazanov, with Oleg Basilashvili, who played the womanizing Samokhvalov, and Lia Ahedjakova, the actress behind the nosy secretary Verechka.
Вы купили новые сапоги, Вера?
Да вот еще не решила, Людмила Прокофьевна. Вам нравится?
Очень вызывающие.
Да.
Я бы такие не взяла.
Значит, хорошие сапоги надо брать.
Taking a break from romantic films, Ryazanov returned to the topics of common goods and private ownership with a ruthless satire. In Garage, employees of an animal research institute pull together a cooperative to build a garage. As they hold a meeting in a closed zoological museum, bad news comes to light. 4 of the planned garage spaces will have to be scrapped because of a highway cutting into the construction site. Therefore, 4 members of the cooperative will have to be excluded, and the cooperative director already made the decision as to who the unlucky 4 are. Despite the immediate protests from the excluded persons, most of the other members don't seem to care, except for one. Yelena Malaeva, a junior research assistant, unexpectedly takes the side of those unfairly removed. A great argument takes place as to who truly deserves a garage space and who doesn't. Accusations fly across the room. Most participants only wish to protect their personal interests. Moreover, it comes to light that some of the members are what is called blatnoi, that is, people who received their favors through connections. The following deliberation, likened to Sidney Lumet's classic 12 Angry Men, transcended socialism and capitalism in showing the true nature of the 32 attendees. Like in the 2 previous pictures, Ryazanov used a 3-camera television setup, allowing some improvisation from the large cast and adding a bit of chaotic realism to what became a classical embodiment of the Stagnation era. Starting around 1979, Ryazanov's face became known to people outside the cinematic circles, as he began hosting a number of television programs. Most notably, Kinopanorama, a talk show dedicated to new films and established actors. His next film project, also on television, was Say a Word for the Poor Hussar, a tragic historical drama. In the 1840s, a shady government official is vetting a unit of hussar soldiers for traitors in their midst. He hires a small-town actor to act as an anti-government rebel, hoping that a soldier will refuse to participate in a fake execution. Unknown to the official, Colonel Pokrovsky, the commander of the hussars, has no desire to act as an executioner and makes a plan to free the captured rebel, completely baffling the actor. For a television project, the film had high production values, with historical costumes and accurate props. Unfortunately for Ryazanov, the filming coincided with the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, and suddenly, a film centering around secret police drew undue scrutiny from censors. The film was shown once, partially censored, on January 1st, 1981, and was then shelved for the next 5 years. Back in 1956, Ryazanov's Carnival Night turned Lyudmila Gurchenko into a superstar. Unfortunately, Gurchenko was immediately typecast as a singing and dancing girl in unsophisticated comedies. Her stardom quickly faded away, and the next 15 years of her career were mostly spent in forgettable or unsuccessful projects. The renewed popularity of the musical genre in the late 70s placed Gurchenko back in the spotlight, and Ryazanov considered her and co-star Andrei Mironov as leads in Irony of Fate, although they only made it in as an Easter egg. After many years, Ryazanov once again cast Gurchenko as his star, this time playing a serious role in his drama Station for Two. Vera, a waitress at a train station cafe in a small town, serves food to Platon, a musician in transit to another destination. An argument over the quality of food causes Platon to miss his train, and another mishap makes him stranded in a strange town without passport or wallet. Vera, perhaps feeling guilty for acting rudely earlier, befriends Platon, attempting to find him a place to stay and even helping him out with a temporary job. As they grow closer, Platon explains the tragic details behind his trip and reveals the reason for his eagerness to reach the destination. Ryazanov's new director of photography, Vadim Alisov, preferred to use handheld cameras whenever possible, a method which helped accentuate the many emotional moments of this melancholic film. Once again featuring 2 unlikely partners in unusual circumstances, Station for Two may be Ryazanov's last classic Soviet-era picture. Without a Dowry, a 19th century play by Alexander Ostrovsky, was adapted into an acclaimed 1936 film by the prolific director Yakov Protazanov. Nearly 50 years later, Ryazanov, not usually associated with classical Russian literature, made a new version titled A Cruel Romance. It is a tragic story of Larisa, a young and attractive woman from a family which is not particularly well off. She is courted by rich merchants and businessmen, and in particular by the flashy steamboat owner Paratov, yet none of them are willing to propose. Karandyshev, a simple government clerk, is madly in love with Larisa, but his attention is not reciprocated. Paratov disappears without saying goodbye, and with limited options, Larisa settles for marrying the pathetic Karandyshev, until Paratov suddenly returns on the day of Larisa's wedding. Except for newcomer Larisa Guzeyeva in the lead role, the cast was full of veteran actors, including Nikita Mikhalkov as the charismatic Paratov. At the time of release, many critics in the official press accused Ryazanov of abusing creative license in regards to classical work. Despite that, Ryazanov's adaptation is regarded today as one of his best films. In the meantime, the new Soviet government of Mikhail Gorbachev began its Perestroika, or restructuring policy. The initial enthusiasm over democratic reforms and decentralization of the economy was soon muted by high unemployment and deficit of staple products. The Soviet values, built over several generations and based on the pursuit of communism, suddenly disappeared with nothing to replace them. Ryazanov made 3 films during this period, all reflecting the general mood of disappointment and despair. Forgotten Melody for a Flute is the story of Leonid, a government official. Tasked with censorship in this era of freedoms, Leonid realizes how pointless his job is and dreams of telling his boss and colleagues how much he dislikes them, but he doesn't have the guts to do so and continues to uphold the system. His personal life is likewise based on dishonesty. Leonid doesn't dare tell his wife that he loves another woman, and when the wife finds out, he returns, but only to save his career. During the production, Ryazanov suffered a sudden internal hemorrhage, a condition which was treated quickly but placed the director in the hospital. Perhaps this reminder of mortality affected an apocalyptic scene in the film, when a heart attack sends Leonid into an otherworldly limbo, a room in which his dead parents and other people wait for judgment. In the 1950s, Ryazanov welcomed a new era in Soviet history with a light-hearted clash of generations. Over 30 years later, he returned to the topic during a time of hopelessness with a picture which may very well be his darkest. In Dear Yelena Sergeyevna, 4 high school students visit the title character, their middle-aged mathematics teacher, to celebrate her birthday in the modest apartment. Yelena is overjoyed, but it soon comes to light that there is another, less pleasant reason for the surprise visit. The teacher happens to have a key to the school safe, which contains the students' final exam papers. Afraid to receive less than stellar grades before graduation, the students would like to replace the papers with well-written ones they brought along. Yelena's answer is a strict no.
Так вот, чтоб вы знали, мои дорогие друзья, талант, он всегда пробьет себе дорогу сам, без посторонней помощи.
Елена Сергеевна, сколько вам лет?
40, а что?
A debate between the teacher and the students goes nowhere. Yelena preaches traditional Soviet values of honesty and hard work, which the students dismiss as irrelevant and blame Yelena's generation for the current state of the country. The students then attempt to intimidate Yelena into submission, a slippery path without a good outcome. The intimate setting of the small apartment accentuates the extreme depth which these seemingly harmless characters are willing to achieve. And it's difficult to believe that the same man who once directed cheerful comedies also made this harrowing thriller. The setting of The Promised Heaven is a junkyard surrounding an old steam locomotive, populated by former artists, musicians, party workers, and other homeless people. The leader of the community, nicknamed President, promises that an alien spaceship will one day arrive and take them to a better place. Until then, they have to defend the junkyard from the local government, which wants to clear the lot and sell it to an American company. The main story concentrates on the misadventures of two homeless women, Fima, an artist reduced to panhandling, and Katya, who was thrown out of the house by her own family. The film, essentially based in a grim, realistic setting, surprises with several surreal, fantastical moments. Some of the film's prophecies spilled over into real life, and the scene in which army tanks move in to destroy the defiant shantytown gained a new context during the 1991 August coup. Due to the darker mood of Ryazanov's Perestroika-era films, they weren't as popular with the viewers, the general public preferring his feel-good pictures of the previous decades. This episode will not go in depth on Ryazanov's post-Soviet works. Suffice to say that they never reached the public appeal nor the critical acclaim of his prior filmography. For Ryazanov, the 90s were a series of highs and lows. He interviewed Russia's new president, Boris Yeltsin, and suffered a terrible blow when his wife Nina Skubina succumbed to cancer. While reaction to his films was subdued, Ryazanov made a successful television career, hosting countless shows and producing documentaries on topics too many to mention, but almost always dedicated to the arts and the creative people behind them. Carnival Night 2, the 2007 sequel to his cinematic debut, became Ryazanov's final film, a symbolic bookend to his career. On November 30th, 2015, Eldar Ryazanov passed away, aged 88. Nevertheless, his legacy lives on. This unassuming man with a perpetually sad and tired face managed not only to perfectly capture the atmosphere of Soviet society, but also adapted to the dramatic changes which shook the country. A filmmaker as much as a poet, Eldar Ryazanov created beloved comedies and tragic melodramas, which returned millions of viewers to a bygone but not forgotten era.
Дорогие товарищи телезрители, пришла пора прощаться. Всему наступает конец. Всего самого прекрасного. До свидания, до новых встреч.
Many sources were used in the making of this episode, most of all Ryazanov's autobiographical work, Untallied Results, which I highly recommend to anyone interested in behind-the-scenes details and the Soviet filmmaking process. If you watched and enjoyed the films of Eldar Ryazanov, then you may also be interested in Soviet Movies Explained, a fascinatingly informative channel also known as Katya Somo X. With great enthusiasm and detailed knowledge of Soviet cinema, Katya disassembles some of the best-known Soviet pictures, not only exploring Ryazanov, but also the films of Leonid Gaidai, Georgy Danelia, and other well-known Soviet directors. As for our program, the next episode will dive into a world of magic and miracles, epic heroes, and legendary villains. Join us for a journey into the strange Soviet fantasy films of the 50s and 60s.